I always throw.
So it should be always camping people for sure. You never know what's going to happen.
Will we be able to see this later?
Yes, it will be on the YouTube page for Peter White.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Mark.
Welcome wow, that's really loud. Welcome everybody to this first reading for the Great Lakes Poetry Festival 2023. I think most of you know me, but I'll still introduce myself for the people who are watching on YouTube. My name is Marty Ackitts, and I'm the Adult Programming Coordinator for Peter White Public Library. And I am also the coordinator for the festival this year. Thank you. If anybody's looking to help out, I always accept help. I just got a few things. I got a couple groups that I need to thank. I need to thank the Friends of Peter White Public Library who provide all of the live streaming equipment for us. So if you are watching on YouTube, you have the Friends of Peter White Public Library to thank for that. And they provide so many funds for the stuff that I do here. So they're just a great resource. And I also need to thank the Carol Paul Memorial Trust Fund because there's some musical stuff coming up. And that's the Carol Paul Memorial Trust Fund finances all of that as well. And of course, we have lots of great partnering organizations for the Great Lakes Poetry Festival, including the Marquette Poet Circle, the UP Poet Laureate Foundation, Pyre Publishing, and Travel Marquette, and Health and Happiness UP Magazine. So it really does take a village to put on a festival, I will tell you that. I'm just going to make you aware of a few things that are coming up. So tomorrow night, we have Diane Seuss, who's going to be doing a live virtual reading. So she'll be on the big screen, but we will have a microphone set up here so that after the reading, you'll be able to come up and ask her questions or interact with her in any way that you would want. Well, not any way, but in most ways that you would want. How's that? But that's tomorrow night at 7 p.m. And then Wednesday night, we have a book launch event for the new UP Poet Laureate, Beverly Mathern. She's going to be releasing her new book on Wednesday. So quite a few other things are coming up. They're all in this poetry festival. A couple things. I have to do all of this business. Andrea back there is reminding me, we do have a survey back there that we would love you to fill out for the Great Lakes Poetry Festival after the event. And if you come to more events, fill out more surveys, because the more surveys we have, the better that we have the ability to get more funding for these festivals. And also, Tina Marin from the Marquette Arts and Culture Center has a survey back there. Now, she gave me this to read, so I'm going to just read this. It's the City Office of Arts and Culture is conducting a survey to learn more about the economic impact of nonprofit arts and cultural events in Marquette. And the data on this survey will assist the library and other local nonprofit organizations to better advocate for services and grant funding. There's been a lot of surveys out there. You might have already filled out this survey, but even if you filled it out, they're still collecting data, and it's actually a survey that you fill out at every single event. So if you filled it out before and you think I don't need to do it, it would be helpful if you could fill it out again. So those are back there as well. So there's 2 surveys. You see, you thought this was free. It's not. So if you could fill those out, that will be very, very helpful. But my main job here is to introduce a really, really, really good friend of mine. We've known each other for, 35 years? Around 35 years, yeah. And that's my friend Jonathan Johnson. So I'm going to read you his little bio, and then I'll say a few other things. Jonathan Johnson is back in his hometown of Marquette, here at Peter White Public Library, and we're so excited to have him here. Let's see. Jonathan's poems have been anthologized in Best American Poetry, published widely in many literary magazines. He's read on National Public Radio. He's a professor at Eastern Washington University, where he teaches poetry in the Master of Fine Arts program and serves as the director and head editor of Willow Springs Books. He migrates between Washington and his ancestral village in the Scottish Highlands in Marquette. And he hosts the Poets Nook on WNMU Public Radio 90. And his most recent books are May is an Island and The Desk on the Sea. And all of his books are back there for purchase. And they're $15 a piece. I've read every single one of them. And I really highly recommend that you pick up all of his books. How's that? All of his books. You can't go. There's no bad book back there. The one thing. I mean, that's all the formal stuff. But what I can tell you about Jonathan is, ever since I've known him when we were in the undergraduates together and then graduate school together, PhD program together, he is one of the most giving, beautiful writers in the world. He's kind, he's generous with his time and his talent. And as soon as I sent him an email asking him if he'd be willing to come and do this, I think anytime he gets an excuse to come to Marquette, he pounces on it, right? But he did not hesitate at all. And he was actually the one that suggested that he do a workshop as well. The workshop that he's going to be doing Wednesday and Thursday, it's a free workshop. You don't even have to pre-register. Just show up with a notebook and a pen. That's all you got to do. You are really going to be in for a treat. Please welcome to the Peter White Public Library stage my great, great friend, Jonathan Johnson.
Renewal. This empty monarch stove and rotting birch aren't much excuse for my stack of stinking beer bottles, but we do have the snow. The cars on snow-packed pavement, exhaust and subsequent taillight, and I want to crack open my fingers. Hear nothing of argument or image as pure song spills out and fills the room. Maybe February enters this town with the clarity of a child's hands, and the lighthouse stands to its knees in black waves, searching the last cloud bellies before the horizon, scanning as if some lover might be sailing Superior home tonight after all these years. This much alone would be a sight. Still, a fine desolation refuses to mix our casualties with the first blood of the ironwood girl as she runs from a barn into a field, twisted junk cars abandoned like her father's lovers in the wreckage of the corn. And if we belong to the Midwest only as abstract expressionists, it's all the same. We live here with lake effect piling in our yards. The snow moves through us without lights and blasts between suspension wires at night above the Mackinac Bridge, sticking in 100-foot-tall strands, and the band covers Pure Prairie League every Thursday, 9 to close. Out at the empty county airport, where all the flights are canceled, blue points strobe in time up the landing strip, just in case. Up in this gable room, the greatest possible bravery is a hairbrush of yellow, spiderweb at dawn. We always toy with hopefulness. Splatters of yellow dot my dark wood floor like dandelions. Above all the empty setting, the people living there under a ceiling of expected snow. Without me, they sleep. But a few old ones eye the night like crushed food they can still chew and shove it in their mouths. Thank you, Marty. And Marty, I've got something for you. From my migrations, and I'll sign this, bring this up afterwards. It's a 12-year-old Glenn Farkless from the Highlands. Yeah, so let me hear.
It's your problem now.
I'll keep it.
Never trust a poet who's a bottle of whiskey. Thank you. Yeah.
I want to thank the festival. This is the coolest thing, the Great Lakes Poetry Festival. I mean, man, that's cool. And it made me sound super cool. We've got our own festival going on at my university, and I had to miss Ada Limon, the U.S. Poet Laureate, so I could fly out. I'm like, I'm sorry, I got to go to the Great Lakes Poetry Festival. I'm like, whoa, man, our professor is really, really cool. He's going to miss Ada Limon to go to the Great Lakes Poetry Festival. So, but it's going to be that, right? I mean, it's clearly going to be that. Ronnie Ferguson, who started it out with Marty, are building something incredibly cool here. And I think you're going to feel, when you look back and remember this, it's going to feel like you were at the second Hiawatha, or you were at like the first Fresh Coast, or any of those cool things, one of the first Art on the Rocks. Because they have their sibling now, right? They've got their literary sibling in the Great Lakes Poetry Festival. I want to thank 3rd Street. A lot of you know why. 3rd Street's a big muse. I want to thank Lake Superior. I want to thank Presque Isle. And I want to thank, Marty mentioned the class I'm going to teach this week on writing your grief. I want to thank my Marquette dead. I want to thank my mom. I want to thank Jim Stedman. Some of you knew these folks. My mom, Sheila Johnson. I want to thank Jim Stedman. I want to thank my best friend at the time, Mac. I want to thank John Kaczynski, the surgeon and a wonderful rascal around town. Brilliant hands, brilliant mind, and a brilliant troublemaker. And I want to thank our friend Helen, the poet Helen Haskell Ramin, who we lost. At least physically, we lost her physically among us this year. Her first book, not her first book, but one of her books, her most recent book, Undone with Wonder. And Helen went to school with Marty and me, and she had this smile, right? Just remember, those of you who knew Helen, just remember that for a minute, right? Like you bump into her, and oh my God, it's you, right? And you feel like you were just arrived from Hollywood or something like that, right? It's you. So let's just take a moment for Helen, and let's think about. I don't think any of us in Marquette knew Little Helen, right? But this is Little Helen. So think about when we die, all of a sudden we're all our ages. Right? I think when we're alive, we're mostly the age we are now. I mean, we can feel all the other ages inside us, right? I don't know about you, but I feel 12 half the time. But when we die to other people, all of a sudden we're all the ages that we were when they were alive, right? Which is a particularly wonderful thing for those who have a hard end, right? For those who have a hard end, and when we're around them, they're mostly that at the time. But then afterwards, they become who they were in their most vibrant. So this is Little Helen. What to rely on. And the book is Undone with Wonder, and it's for sale, I think, at Wintergreen, at the History Center. Is that right, Marty? Yeah. And you guys have a copy here, right? Or if you don't, I'll donate one. One to check out. Okay. What to rely on. When I was young, my mother was as moody as the sea outside our cottage door. In those days, it was the sea I could rely on, Salt air, faint whiff of fish, the onshore breeze that blew rifts of unhinged seaweed and driftwood up the cove. I could rely on the breeze and the seaweed and the wind changing directions, because it always did. The clouds would suddenly fly out past the horizon, and the seaweed too, and the driftwood, and the cove would become sparkly clean, the water ice cold. The ocean was always there for me, the in-tides, the out-tides, the lap of waves, the thrash of storms, reliable in its moodiness, and my mother in all her moods, I have to tell you, was always there too. Nose sunburned, cheek flushed, her hair salt sprayed and wavy. I could rely on my ocean moody mother to make the egg salad sandwiches for my brother and me, to pack the plums and fig Newtons in our picnic lunches. I could rely on my ocean moody mother to let us go unfenced into the spruce and balsam forest and onto the rocks beyond the cove to the tip of the point. I could rely on her to set us free to wade in the life-packed tide pools, to pluck up periwinkles and starfish and sea urchins, to cradle baby crabs, to dip our own feet into that wild, moody sea. Thank you, Helen. So I think what I'd like to do is take you across a map, do a little geographical story, kind of the theme as Marty was talking about, migrations. And I thought what we'd do is we'd start in Marquette, and then we'd do a few little side trips, and then we'd travel to Scotland, and we'd come back and land in Marquette again for one poem. So if, with your permission, that's what I'd like to do, is like take us on a little trip. So I had the incredible honor, thanks again and again and again, Bev. I don't know if you quite know what it meant. I had the incredible honor a few years ago of reading at Northern. Northern had me back, and there's nothing in the world like coming back to our alma mater. Years ago, I had the cool job of driving Gwendolyn Brooks. Gwendolyn Brooks would be real cool. I had the cool job of driving Gwendolyn Brooks to her reading, and she had said, well, I don't fly, but Marquette is kind of north of Milwaukee, right? I said, yeah. She said, well, I'll take the train to Milwaukee and you can pick me up for the reading. So Diane at the time, Lanto, I think Miller now maybe, and I got a Northern station wagon, right? We drove down and we thought, she's gonna kill us. She's gonna kill us, right? This is 5 hours, right, at the time, or 5.5, I think, because it's all 55 speed limits everywhere. And we show up and here comes this beautiful, wonderful little old woman, and she was so incredibly sweet. She didn't even notice how far we were driving her. Rain's falling and the tires are slashing and the windshield wipers. And she recited 7 at the Golden Shovel, we real cool for us. And I remember as we pulled into Marquette, she said, my religious you two kids is kindness. And I thought, wow, man, Gwendolyn Brooks, right? And then so when I came back to Northern, I was mind blown. I'm reading in the same space as Gwendolyn Brooks. And so I decided, well, what to do to mark that? And I thought, well, I should walk here, right? Not from Washington, although that is in the cards, right? If I can get my knee right, I plan on someday walking home from Washington State. But I thought, well, Munising, right? So I had my dad drive me over to Munising. I took a couple days and walked back from Munising. And I'm walking past the brownstone. There's that long curve where there's kind of a swamp, this really beautiful swamp that in the fall is just stunning. It heads out kind of into some boreal forest, and then on the other side is Superior. And that's where Amy and I actually decided to get married. Her parents had given us their old Subaru station wagon. We were driving home from school downstate, and that's where we decided to get married. And I found a license plate there, right? And it was said, Michigan, if you get a trailer, you don't have to renew it. It says permanent trailer, right? That's what the permanent means. And I thought, wow, that's what Amy got, right? It was a permanent trailer. So I brought that to the reading, and that was my kind of security blanket, right? So that started a tradition for me now. So wherever I go and give a reading, I always look for some object to kind of talk to me about the place and tell me about itself. So today I went out to the place where Amy and I were married at Presque Isle, kind of up the steps from the gazebo. Gazebo wasn't there at the time, but those steps that go up from the gazebo, and there's a little meadow there. And there were some big birch trees at the time. And for our wedding, we had this hand-thrown bowl, and we took it down to the water, and we filled it with Lake Superior water and put our rings in there, right? That's what our rings were going to be brought in on and passed around. It was a very hippie wedding. Some of you were there and you remember. Amy's great-grandmother, very, very Catholic woman, very, kind of had the old country in her still. And Amy said, oh, she's one of my favorite people in the world. I really, really hope she's okay with the wedding. She just wanted her to be okay. And she pulled her aside. Amy's great-grandmother did after the wedding, and she said, that was my favorite wedding. So I don't know. But at any rate, so I went out there to that spot, and I thought, well, maybe I'll find something there. And I found this piece of drift birch. So we'll make that our talisman through the reading tonight. I have this fantastic father-in-law, Amy's dad, John, is this fantastic, wise, wonderful fisherman of many decades in Marquette, woodsman, has taught me incredible physical things, but all the while he's teaching me incredible psychological and spiritual things. And he said to me today, he said, so why do you write poems? Which, when you've been married to someone's daughter for 29 years, that's totally okay, right? He didn't ask me, he had the kind grace not to ask me that, like when we were engaged. So why do you write poems? Which is how I would have taken it. But he asked me today, why do you write poems? Why do you do that? And so I was thinking about that all day, and I had my stock answer, right? I put together my stock answer, and he turned about 40, and I thought, okay, I think the reason I read and write poems is to more fully inhabit my existence. And I'm pretty sure that's right. I think that's why I'm doing it right now, to more fully be inside my existence, to more fully be in it, the grief, the wonder, which is problematical too, because I'll talk a little bit about Zen and like how that kind of is the yin to that yang. And it's one of the reasons I don't write much about Zen, because you don't want to more fully inhabit it. It's kind of the opposite in a way. But at any rate, I was still thinking about John's question all day, and I was down at the cove finding this piece of driftwood, and I had my hearing aids. So I got hearing aids. So I think the straw that broke the camel's back is when I heard Amy tell me something, and I repeated it back to her, which those of you who've gone through some hearing loss know this routine, right? So she'll say something, and I'll repeat it back to her. And so I repeated back, "You're sending the cats to another dimension." And she just looked at me and she said, "I am sending away for the cat's medication." And that was it, like hearing aids, right? So I hadn't been home since then, right? Like this was like, a month or so ago, I got the hearing aids. So I'm down at the cove, and every drop, right? Every pebble rattling back behind the waves, right? As the waves recede, all of it, right? God, I wish there was hearing aids for like everything, for sight and for touch and for, spiritual awareness and all of it. And I thought, that's why I read and write poetry, right? Poems are kind of like hearing aids for your existence, right? Like when it starts to feel further away and dull, and you can't quite feel what your existence is trying to tell you sometimes, and it just doesn't have that kind of brightness. Poems, that's what they are. So there's my answer, Dad. Okay. So it's spring, but we got some poems of grief. I know a lot of us are bringing grief into the spring. This poem is called Dispensation. It's from my most recent book, May is an Island, and it's the first poem in the book. And a dispensation, probably everybody here knows. I mean, we're at Peter White Library, for crying out loud. This is like a fantastic private liberal arts college for the rest of us, right? For like all of us old people and whoever, it's like a gorgeous liberal arts college. Even the architecture. And then you got people like Marty, who are like the old wonderful faculty who are like keeping it going. So you all know what dispensation means, but just to remind us all, it's this sort of permission or release from responsibility, right? You think you've done something wrong or whatever, it's a dispensation. Release from judgment. Dispensation. We are mistaken to suppose the dead want us to walk out at night and stare alone into the dark horizon. Thinking them just beyond the wind, we stand facing the cold and waves like a shore pine shaped to absence. We speak to clouds we know only by a lack of stars. We count ourselves with them, keeping our backs to town or gazing down shore at its small lights with abstracted affection. But the dead don't ask for our loneliness. We confuse loyalty to what is not with loyalty to them while trying not to shiver. In fact, our little errand was done when we heard the crescendo and diminuendo of those waves, visible only in the white of their ending, and thought what little we perceive of beauty's extent. Beyond that, the dead would send us to dens of laughter and warm light. "What are you doing out here?" they would ask. "There are songs being sung. Take yourself there. Touch someone's hand. Sit at a table where someone speaks the name I knew you by."
It is so cool to be able to read and have, oh, did I forget that book? No, there it is, hiding out.
It's so cool to be able to read and not have to explain, okay, so Van Gogh's is pronounced Van Gogh's, not Van Gogh's, and it's this bar, and blah, blah, blah. It's so wonderful not to explain all that. This poem is dedicated to one of my other great wise teachers, someone who I've known longer than I've known anyone in this room. I've known Professor Paul Lindbergh, who I also know as Teshin, who is our priest at the Lake Superior Zindo. I've known him since I was 4, and through many iterations, he has been there for me. I remember one of the earliest little kindnesses he did to me, in the infinite number of kindnesses that he's done to me, was I was really into trucking. When I was a little boy, I wanted to get a truck, a great big Kenworth. And in the PhD program where Paul and my dad were comrades, Paul was making a living, scraping by, working at a trucking magazine, right? And so he would save all these issues of this trucking magazine, and he would bring them to the house. And so I have all these, Kenworth and Peterbilt, and all these great trucks. It was meant to be. It was meant to be. So this poem is dedicated to him, and it's from my second collection of poems, which came out, I guess, 10 years ago, In the Land We Imagined Ourselves. The whole collection is dedicated to our great poetry teacher, Russ Thorburn. Van Gogh's, Tuesday night in the week of the Buddha's enlightenment. Snow falls. Stress the first syllable, not like Vincent van Gogh, but Van Gogh's. Snow falls. Say it and step out before Jim and Ray finish Into the Mystic, so that the guitar follows even after the door closes behind you, to when that foghorn blows, you know I will be coming home, as the rumble comes roof light riding the plow up third and finally passes, as Ray hits that high note you've waited for all night, and I, to the spark-tossing thunder of blade on asphalt, up through your feet into Wanna Rock Your Gypsy Soul, to the side-to-side lights on the back of the plow, by now passing Crescent and Discount Vacuum, the pasta shop, Prospect Street. If the town could take you to bed, this is her touching your cheek just before. And you go, knowing the music will fill this cold air where you were, through 3, 4, 5 more passes of the plow as you sleep, and Jim unplugs his bass, and the Van Gogh sign goes dark. Let this be how it is just before dying, knowing that what you noticed remains. Amy can tell you, I call it reverential. She says it's a little OCD. But it's tomato. I only listen to Into the Mystic when I'm in Marquette or on my way to Marquette, right? I actually walked out of a Starbucks the other day because it came on. I'm like, no, I can't hear it anywhere else besides in Marquette or on the way to Marquette.
I send it as often as I can.
Yes. Yeah, and you send it to me, and I'm like, Eric, thank you. It's so great to be thought of. However, there's a problem here. I'm far away. So I was out at the island getting our stick for the reading today, and I ran into this sweet couple, and they had a cat on a harness at the island. It's what you do things when you're a very young couple, right? They're this earnest, delightful, beautiful young couple. They had a cat on a harness out at the island and the cat got away. All right, so right now the cat is on the loose. The cat's name is Bunker, right? You didn't know you were going to have a job when you came. So what I want everybody to do is take out your phone and photograph this. So when you're out at the island in the next couple of days, if you see Bunker probably won't come, but if you see Bunker, you can call them, because they were so incredibly sweet. They were like all of us when we were 23. That's just what they look like. And I would love it if they got Bunker back. So I'm going to pass this around. Can I give this to you, Dave?
Poetry saves lives, right? You can have a poetry meeting, and it's going to save Bunker and bring Bunker home.
So take a photograph of Bunker and call them if you spot Bunker. So I'm going to preempt. We'll have a little Q&A. I plan on asking you some Qs, but we'll have a little Q&A at the end. But I'm going to preempt the big question, right? Everybody asks what are you working on now? So what I'm working on now is actually a book of short stories, and I've been working on it now for about, I published the first one in 1997, so now tends to go on, right? But I'm getting there. I'm just about done, I think. It's going to be called The Little Lights of Town. It's got 2 epigraphs. One epigraph is that Dylan and Cash version, that wonderful one where they kind of are out of sync on the lyrics a little bit now and then, and it feels like there's a campfire. That fantastic Dylan and Cash version of Girl from the North Country, and it's Remember Me to One Who Lives There, right? They're all Marquette stories. It's a book of Marquette stories. And the second epigraph is from the Police Blotter. I read the Mining Journal every day, right? It doesn't come out on Sundays, but I read it every other day on my phone. And the Police Blotter is my favorite part of it. My daughter's too. When she's in town, she says, like, get this, you won't believe this. This is amazing. Like there was one, raging, something like, serious domestic violence. Come on in. We're between poems, so it's fine. Serious domestic fight, whatever, shouting, no fight, someone assembling gym equipment. Frustrated. And so there's this one, and it's the second epigraph for this collection of stories, and it's large fire, 200 yards offshore, period. Next sentence. It was the moon. I could write for the rest of my life and never touch that. That was the most beautiful little haiku-like poem I've ever come across. Right there in the Police Blotter in the Mining Journal, right? So that's the second epigraph, and the book's dedicated to you. It's dedicated to the people of Marquette, past, present, and future. So I'll let you know. I promise to get the word out when that book is done and comes out, but it's close. So I thought I'd read just 2 paragraphs from the start of the story in the book. The story's called Balsam, and I had the great honor of it's published last year in the 50th anniversary of Plowshares magazine, and I'll give a copy, Marty, to the library so that you can put it out and people can read the whole story, because it's got a little hook, I think, at the beginning, so people can find out what happens. Also, anybody who's cared for the dying, especially people who do it professionally, hospice workers, nurses, I think this story is kind of for you. Keats was a hospice worker. They weren't called that yet, but Keats cared for his dying mom when he was 12. He cared for his dying brother when his brother was 19 and Keats was 21. And I think Keats learned a lot to be who he was through that work. And so I think this story is partly my admiration for people who do that. And those of you who've known hospice workers through difficult times, or you are a hospice worker, there's a thing that hospice workers will tell you about. And this is in appreciation for that thing. And you know what I'm talking about. Balsam. It's a pity, atop a tower of pity, that Rick is going to die indoors and in town. But if that's how it's going to be, this is about as good a place as possible. The window looks east, out over the bare trees and rooftops and street lights and red and green and yellow turning traffic lights and the little amber upstairs bedroom windows coming on and the slate horizon of lake across the entire edge of the earth at the burning skies flaring a last pink into blue. I'd have preferred to take him down there, to the parking lot above McCarty's Cove, or the one across from Picnic Rocks, Or maybe even up into the woods around Big Bay, some spruce shaded place beside the Yellow Dog River. Shouldn't someone get to die wherever he would have wanted? Shouldn't someone at least get that if the appointed moment is going to be deliberate and by his own brother's hand? So the side trips, the Birch put me in mind of it. I was thinking, well, where will we go for some side trips from Marquette? In 1957, my grandparents, my dad's parents, bought a little farm in Bonner County in northern Idaho. Which now, if you say you got a farm in Bonner County, northern Idaho, people ask, like brain surgeon or radiologist or software engineer or whatever. It's one of those places, right? But not them. I mean, they picked grapes and in California and built boxcar doors on the coast of Washington and whatever to scrape together their little bit of money to buy this ranch. And when I was a kid, we'd go there for summers, sometimes for Christmases, kind of like Amy and I, and when she can, our daughter does with Marquette now. And the place that your parents, Jim Harrison said this, the places your parents took you when you were little are always kind of enchanted, right? So we go to the farm, and my grandfather, he would walk a route around the ranch. It's 80 acres. He would walk a route around it, which is big around here, but 80 acres isn't big out there, or at least it didn't used to be. And there was this grove of birch, and in the crook of one of the branches, he kept a black wax pencil. And on his walk, he would write the date on the birch, and then he would write like the weather, and then he would write what was going on, right? And so it might say like 6/15/79, sunshine. Ronnie called, is coming to visit, in August or something like that. And when you would go there, you'd stand in the middle of it. It would just look like a birch grove, right? Because there's all these striations. And then your eyes would adjust. And you'd realize you were surrounded by language, right? Like DNA strands of this person's life, right? All around you. And the last one just recently faded, right? I went up and found, two winters ago, I went up to my uncle and I found like the last little bit, and it said Yakima. They would often migrate themselves down into Arizona, and it said something we couldn't read, and then the word Yakima. And that was the last word out of all these thousands of words around us that we were able to find. He's been dead since '04. And I had friends who said, oh no, you should photograph it, and you should document it, and you should record that. And I thought, no. And this is where some of Teshin's teachings, I think, were super useful to me. No. That's exactly the opposite of what you do, right? We come, we are, and we go, right? Keats, on his tombstone, his friends screwed it up. They put other stuff, but Keats said, this is what I want on my tombstone. Here lies one whose name was writ in water, right? And that's kind of, what the farm was. Well, on one of these walks, my grandfather, I said, I want to build a cabin up in the woods here and live near you and Grandma. And he said, when I was 12, he said, we'll pick a place. Right? He was that kind of guy. He said, we'll pick a place. And so I picked this site on a ridge looking out over this forested valley with the mountain opposite. No houses. You still can't see any houses from there. It could be 10,000 years ago, totally dark at night. And he wrote on one of the trees there, John's site, June 9th, 1979. And sure enough, Amy and I, when we were in graduate school, started going out there and cut the trees, and we skinned them, and we built this log cabin. And then we moved into it. No electricity, no running water, a lot like around here, right? Like a lot of Kathleen's neighbors up around Big Bay. And we started trying to sort of carve out a life for ourselves. And it was beautiful and wonderful and tragic. We lost our first daughter, who was born prematurely and did not survive. And my first memoir, Hannah in the Mountain, is about that experience. And so I'm just going to read a little bit from that. Hannah's become sort of a founder of so much of what we are. We learned a lot of stuff medically that she was really important for, that allowed us to have the lives and the family we have now. But we also learned a lot about how to live and the preciousness of life and what it can be, how arbitrary it can be about whether or not you get one. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like we owe so much of who we are to her. In fact, my daughter's college essay, she brought it to Amy and me, and we were both like, we were both shattered. And her college application essay had to do with her sister. And she said, I lived my life knowing that my life was possible, this sister that I lost. So I thought I'd read a little bit about the two of us in the cabin from this old memoir. We danced last night. I was warming soup on the newly installed gas stove in our low little kitchen. Amy was at the table figuring May's bills. How much for student loans and the truck payment? How much for the pine boards to finish the ceiling? Sandpoint radio was coming in clear, the signal bouncing its way up the valley and finding our old, dusty, battery-powered stereo when they played Pure Prairie League's Amy. I'm a bad dancer and was out of practice as we hadn't danced since early winter, but Amy helped me find the beat, then let me lead. Our shoes shuffling on the plywood floor, her dark, thick hair swaying across her shoulders and shining in the kerosene lamplight. Evening was ending in the first starlit blue behind the big triangle windows in the living room gable. Later, Amy would lie awake beside me in the loft just above the kitchen where we danced. Later, she would talk about joining a group for grieving parents, about wanting to walk in the forest alone. Later, I would lie sleepless after Amy had at last drifted off, and I would picture Hannah's feet falling into this world. But as we danced, all that suffering was later. Amy, what you gonna do? The radio sang as the smell of soup rose around us and we spun through that generous moment. So Anya comes along. She's 8, and we're living in Europe. Let's see, I think it's going to be, where are you? It's going to be here. And we're living in Europe, and we decide to go take a week in Paris. Amy and I had gone when we were in college. I worked as a janitor at Northern. She babysat. We scraped together some money, and we went to Europe and backpacked around. And so we thought we'd go show Anya when she was 8. The other thing that's kind of contextualizingly useful is my mom had died 4 years before this year that we lived in Europe. Anybody see that? This is not the poem, by the way. I do write conversational poems, but anybody see that movie? We've all are of an age, or most of us, to have seen The Red Balloon. That movie that'll just, that just tear your heart apart. That's referenced in this poem. Balloon. Twine ropes webbing down to the tiny wicker basket and tiny sandbags waiting to be cut loose if the treetops rise too close. The balloon hangs to one side above sable brushes, putty knives, and a polished wood desk easel in the narrow window of a Latin Quarter art supply. When I was a boy, my mother brought home a projector from the university and showed The Red Balloon on the wall of our student family apartment. I was learning to be tender, to believe the world's delicate things reciprocate a boy's affection. Balloon, balloon, the boy called, and the balloon trailed him silently. I wept when the bully's stones burst the taut, bright skin, and wept on for the empty balloon, even after its compatriots had found the boy and carried him up with their colors over the rooftops of Paris. The red balloon was gone. It had showed the boy his life and died. Halfway across this city of wrought and chiseled inanimates, gilded, glassed, oiled, and acrylic objects meant to elicit adult admiration and here and there outright pathos, my daughter will be rising late in a hotel bed beside her mother, her stuffed lamb thread-worn and smelling of old fevers, juice, and soap, smelling of her own skin on her starched pillow. She'll be stepping from the shower, steam rising from her shoulders. My mother loved me like that, remembered the waking child's smell on my skin and hair My smooth renewal, stepping from bath to towel. Me, of all people in the world. And now she's gone. Down from the shop window, the model balloon is light as memory and fragile, but it's safe in crumpled newspaper in a white box I carry through streets and over bridges as the sky, as if in invitation, breaks open. It hangs in our house to this day, that balloon does, for those of you who've been to our place out west, it hangs in our house. About 10 years ago, Anya put a little Sirius Black and a little Harry Potter and a little Hermione in it. And they're still up there in the balloon floating over our living room. So speaking of the kid, speaking of Anya, I'm going to read a poem in honor of her that I hadn't planned on reading, but she just told us a thing. She just told us, well, okay, let me go back. For our 20th anniversary, no, good grief, for our 20th anniversary 9 years ago, Amy and I went to Greece, to Samos Island. I got tickets and we went to this island that's very not touristed, not visited very much, among other places, and we spent some time there. And so that's thing one. Anya was with us. She was 14. She brought her best buddy. We got this cottage that had a little stone cottage outside, and we could hear Mamma Mia blasting, right? The soundtrack to Mamma Mia blasting, and there were these two shutters. So it's like a movie set. All the wood trim is all faded. It's this sort of faded Greek blue, the shutters, and it's all stones. And then they throw open the shutters, and one sticks her head out one way, and the other sticks her head out the other. So, get this. She just called us not long ago and said she won a Fulbright to Greece for next year. She graduated last year. And she's going to go study, wait for it, she's going to go study, it's a research Fulbright, she's going to go study human rights law and refugee status for people fleeing from climate disaster, right? She's going to try to help the EU write some laws to give people refugee status when their village dries up. So this is in honor of her. We were there around Easter time. And the village, the tradition there is the icons, those beautiful, often gold leaf, artworks, don't leave the church, right? All year they don't leave the church, except for Easter Eve, right? They're brought out on Easter Eve after the sun goes down to the village square. There are 5 churches in the village. It's the most homogeneously Christian country in the world, right? It's like 98% Greek Orthodox people identify as in Greece. So even in a tiny little village, 5 churches, right? It's ancient 5 churches, and they bring them all out into the middle. The other thing that's useful to know in this poem is we were there during the Greek economic catastrophe, right? It was total, everybody's credit card machine was broken, right? Would of course that, oh, sorry, credit card machine's broken. Can you do cash, right? Which may have had something to do, that kind of, well, whatever. At any rate, Greek economic meltdown is when we were there. Samos Island ending in Easter. Friday after sundown, men carry, okay, so I guess it's 2 days before Easter, right? Friday after sundown, men carry the icon from church to square on a flower-canopied, candle-spiked bier. Bulbs of electric flame hold in sea wind that pulls across blossoms to lift a few petals away. Stay, the woman takes my hand in the crowd. They will come from all 5 churches. Palms rise to their tossing fronds, and the stone lion presides over beards and gold robes of priests converging before the holy, unflinching faces borne aloft out into passion one night a year. Turns out, faith does fine without belief. The tears bloom cold and clean through my own bare austerity. The waves arrive in centuries belonging to no one's Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison for somewhere else is forever's bankrupt asylum across the darkness and traveling lights. Closer sheets move and stay against skin, and someone allows someone in for the 50 billionth first time. Grace here comes jagged and bright, tiny as the key to a stone cottage in the hills among the concrete, half-finished villas. Through great Sabbath into another night, a gale off the Aegean rattles the shutters and smells of olive wood burning in stoves. If debt's a sovereign, let this be the far unseen province. Old women's hands break bread untouched by the knife, and children bring it to table in baskets. Kyrie washes its song over refrain, liaison over abstain. The wisdom of joy is in its insistence. Down in the mostly empty tavern, 3 old men strum and sing and smoke into the last midnight. In the morning sun, a few fishing boats tied off along the quay, most up on stilts, awaiting summer and paint. So, one more little side trip. In 2003, one of my former graduate students calls me up, and her partner at the time, now husband, and she were part of winter studies. So her husband was a guide in Yellowstone, and they were wolves had only recently been reintroduced, within 7 years before. And winter study is this project where for the whole month of December, a team of 3 people, right? You don't have to be a biologist, you can just get training for this. A team of 3 people is given the radio collar frequencies to one pack, right? Every pack has at least one member with a radio collar. And so one member of the team is given the team is given the radio frequency, and you go out with an antenna and you find your pack, and every day for a month you record everything they do. Every single thing they do. And now it's like millions and millions of words, right? This still goes on. And, who's in the pack? What do they do today? You go down and you take samples of whatever they kill when they're done eating it, and you send them away to a lab. And so this former student of mine calls me and says, so one of our members has a toothache and needs to go to the dentist. Right? And in my memory of this, she doesn't even finish the sentence, right? I'm digging out my sleeping bag and my binoculars and driving 80 miles an hour to get to Yellowstone. And we watched a pack I got to be part of it for a few days, and that was it, man. I was totally hooked. And so to this day, every year I go and I spend time in Yellowstone, and I teach a class to my graduate students in researching and writing in the field, and we go and we watch wolves, and then we write about it. I get paid, which is like, I can say that out loud here because what a scam. I can't believe I get to do that and get money for it. At any rate, so I'm always a week in Yellowstone, 3rd week of June. I'm always there. And Amy and I have a pretty good thing, I think, and I miss her, right? It's good to miss your spouse and then come back to them. And this is written in missing her. It's called Amy. This morning, I heard wolves through mountain rain. In thin first light, the low sky wet my face. The subject was loneliness. Always again loneliness. We are each our own piece of this world a while. From my body across the valley, I watched them find one another, 4, and sniff and wag and turn circles of joy and trot off together. I drove 3 hours of mountain road to call you. So you know that thing that you do, those of you who are not here all the time, maybe you even do it if you are here all the time, when every once in a while you go, Marquette, it used to be this and used to be that, oh man, it's all changey and everything. And it's like a hobby we have here. Oh, you should have seen it. And I was doing this. I was walking in the harbor with another great teacher of mine, Jim Harrison, who I was fortunate enough to call a friend, and we're walking in the harbor, and it was late in his life. He had his cane, and he was very, very elderly, and he was blind in one eye. He actually wasn't all that elderly, but he'd been Jim Harrison for 75 years, so that's like 185 in the rest of us years. And we're walking along, and I'm doing that thing, right? I'm complaining. I'm like, it looks like Connecticut, right, with all the fancy this and the fancy that. And these used to be like warehouses, and high school, we'd come down here, it was all ashes, and I wasn't listening to myself, right? I'd never even been to Connecticut. I was sounding like a complete, it's amazing he didn't just kind of like keep walking, right? There's a story once that Paul told at the Zindo about the pebble in the shoe, right? Be careful not to be the person who's the pebble in the shoe, right? And I was definitely the pebble in the shoe. Harrison stops me. This is going to be gendered, right? He's this old guy, so he could be gendered. He stops me, and he looks at me with his one good eye, and he goes, well, what are you going to do? Stop loving a woman because she gets older? And you know, like normally, epiphanies are something you got to go out and get yourself, right? Epiphanies are not something that's transmittable, right? Usually, sometimes in great literature. But this was an epiphany that he gave me, and since then I've been fine. I've been completely fine, right? I mean, it's this woman we still love, or person, or whatever, that we still love, and we're going to love it through all the changes, right? We're going to love it. And you know, it doesn't mean it's easy to see sometimes, right? But we're going to keep loving it. And so this is kind of a poem about that. You know those, out at the island, those little jetties between like Sunset Point? This is so cool. Everybody knowing like what I'm talking about is so cool. I've read this poem hundreds of times, right? And I've got to explain, well, there's this island, and Amy and I were married there, but it's not really an island, blah, 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 blah. So this is about going out there. This is about that problem of returning to Marquette again and again. You know that one of those jetties was very special to us, like in high school and through our courtship. And it was the one that had the like little window in it, right? The one that had the arch, and the waves would come through the arch, and we'd go out and we'd sit on the top of that and get our pizza and watch the sunset. So that factors in here. It's a sonnet, by the way, with an amputation, and you'll hear the amputation at the end. Suddenly seeing in absent sandstone how it will be. Mostly, time is slow about amputating our lives from us. Our 15-year-old sits at the table where she was 4, debating how many weeks in our hometown will fit into her summer, and we let her win. My young body and your young body are gone. Years we don't see some people we call friends. Our college has buildings where there was lawn. Today, though, back here without you, I walked the island shore path out to the spire on which we sat with our pizza slices. Our rock, jetty in the waves, perch over flat water, where the iced brush parted out past the snow, I saw what some storm had done. Okay, let's take a little side trip to Scotland, then we'll come back home, and then we'll just chat. We'll chat. We'll go over to anybody who wants to go over, we'll go over to the landmark and have a drink. So I'm just going to read the beginning of this. This is my second memoir about moving to Scotland for a year, and I don't think you need to know anything about it. This is from the very beginning when I go to look for a house for us, and we're trying to decide, do we live on the water, do we live in the mountains, where are we going to live? Amy's a native coastal dweller. Home for her has always meant the craggy shore and cove beaches around Marquette, her little upper Michigan city. There, Lake Superior is like a freshwater sea, the world's largest, stretching to the northern horizon, across which the gold lights of iron ore ships pass at night. Waves boom up against the cliffs in the fall, sending spray into the forest, glazing the branches with ice. Marquette is also where my parents settled, and I spent the latter years of my own childhood. It's where Amy and I spoke our wedding vows in a clifftop meadow above Superior. A Scottish friend in America had said that if we liked coastline, we should check out the string of little fishing villages south of St. Andrews. Online, we found a couple of fishermen's cottages that we liked. Some had windows from which you could watch sunrise over the North Sea. Anya drew little red circles these down and to the right on the map, closer to her eye level. We put a big map on the wall, one of those big Michelin maps the size of a bed sheet, and she would circle all the places she wanted to see in Scotland. She was 8 and she was so pissed at us for taking her out of school for a year. She had said, so I applied for sabbatical. Daddy applied for sabbatical. If we get it, we get to move overseas. And she's like, okay. And I got it. We announced it. We fixed a big fancy dinner. She was a big fan of Harry Potter. It was all filmed in Scotland. We thought this is going to go great, right? And the only tantrum between really literally just about her birth and now, right, was when we said, I got the sabbatical. We're moving to Scotland for a week. And she goes, oh no, can't go on vacation for 2 weeks like normal people, have to go for a whole year. And she stormed out and slammed her door. So to try to somehow make it a little more her own, we got this big map, and she did research. She loves to do research, right? So she's going off to Greece to do. And she circled all the places she wanted to see and looked them all up, and that helped a little bit. At any rate, so she circled the places where I was going to go look at cottages. To save money, we decided I'd make the scouting journey alone. I had a few days in May to find us the place into which we'd move in July. I brought a picture Anya had drawn, a little house with a door and 2 windows, 3 arched and snow-capped mountains behind, a straight line for the beach, and a squiggly line for waves in front. In big block letters, I read each night when I put the drawing on whatever nightstand I'd be sleeping beside, she had written, "Good night, Daddy. I love you. Get a good house." It was GIT, get a good house. So the mountains or the sea, the question had seemed so important at the time. Which reality would we give ourselves to step into and make a life for a while? I drove that black rental Saab. Okay, I have to stop here for a minute and say, among the things that Teshin has taught me in this world, and it's sad because it's gone, like the words on the birch tree, like Keats's name in water, among the things that Paul has taught me is that a Saab is a good car, right? And so when I got to the airport, this guy comes out and says, oh, we don't have any more subcompacts, I'm so sorry, but you'll be happy. I promise you I'll be able to make you happy. And so we go out to the parking lot, and I knew Scotland might have been waiting for us and be a good choice. Because we went out of the parking lot where I had reserved this little teeny compact car, and there is this black Saab 90, right? It looks like an arrow, and that's how it drove too. It drove like an arrow, right? Like this high off the ground, and I thought, this might be a lucky place for us. I drove that black Saab fast by American, if not Scottish standards. Man, they drive fast there. Between appointments with landlords. Each village we had imagined came into view. The mountains were higher and darker, the sea vaster. But there was another question pushing me on, I now realize. A question I had yet to articulate to myself. Was I moving to Scotland to mourn or rejoice? In the 4 years since the death of my mother, sorrow had become for me a daily way of life. The world had been empty of the one person I believed knew it best, knew me best. Everything she'd ever thought and seen and felt, every bit of wisdom, every memory in every neuron in that vast galaxy of neurons of her was gone. Nowhere. A few ashes in Lake Superior, sinking, floating out. And yet, through those same 4 years, she'd been everywhere. In the overflying geese I addressed with, "Hi, Mom." In the bright anticipation on faces here and there in each new poetry class I taught. Most of all, in my family. In the husband I wanted to be for Amy. In the parent I wanted more than I'd ever wanted anything to be for Anya. My mother continued filling me with capacity and gratitude. I could hear her voice. Look, notice, love. It was a false choice, of course, grief or wonder. Even before my mom died, when I knew it was coming, I had understood intellectually that grief and wonder must go on together, the twin poles of what would be my new motherless existence as my mother's son. But how? Parents die. It's the natural order of things. I was desolate, but for 4 years I endured as people do. I had my work, writing and teaching. I had a house, bills, emails. I had my new obsession, Scotland, getting closer. All the while, though, sorrow and joy were at war, each determined to claim me, to be the one truth of my existence. The person who had given me my life and taught me to live was gone. No, she was giving me my life still teaching me to live it. No, she, the person herself, was no more. And so on the battles went, through the days and into years. I wept in the car alone a lot. I sang with the windows down. I knew that the reconciliation of life and death, of grief and wonder, is the great story of the human spirit. I knew it from John Keats and Mozart, both of whom my mother had given me. I knew it from my mother herself, but I couldn't feel it. Not in the way I would need to feel it if I were going to pass on to my own child my mother's grace for living in that great paradox. Maybe in Scotland I could learn. Scotland would be away from the normalcy that had merely sustained me, my job and house and emails. And though I had not yet understood why, the beauty and truth of the Scotland I sought, whether in the mountains or beside the sea, would be inseparably somber and ecstatic, like the life for which I was also looking. So we moved there, and we'd been there a while, and we thought, we should go looking for ancestors. It's the American thing you do, right? When you go to whatever the country is that we immigrated from, except for those few folks who had this spot all along. For the rest of us, we often figure, well, where did we come from? So we had some information, and we went looking for a couple of graves. We thought we'd go up and find a couple of graves of my great-great-grandparents, Anne Campbell and John McClure. And we saw on the map Glen Ellen. Well, that looks pretty cool. It's on the sea way up in the highlands. So we drove and drove and drove up this little winding one-lane road, right? This little white car just up and up and up. And we get to this summit, Radigan Pass it's called, and we crest out, and down below is this glen, right? These glaciated mountains and these long parabolic slopes, and down at the bottom these like little 5 and 10 acre pastures with the river flowing through it, and then the river down where the village center is emptying into the sea, right? And across the sea about 1.5 miles, and the sea there, it's the Irish Sea, is called the Sound of Slate, and across the Sound of Slate, the Isle of Skye. By the way, you don't have to do anything to write a poem in Scotland. You just have to say the names of shit, right? It's unbelievable. It's like it just drops out of the sky, poetry does. So across the Sound of Slate, the Isle of Skye, right? And I thought, I'd never been a believer in genetic memory, right? I thought, yeah, nonsense, right? And I thought, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. So we found the graves, and to make a long story short, we asked around in the pub, where are there any living McClures? My mom's maiden name. Are there any living McClures in the village still? And they said, oh, you want to see Euston down at Riverfoot Cottage, which was the cottage where the river went into the sea. And so we went down to look for Euston, and nobody's there. We left a long note explaining who we are. We drive out of the driveway, and we see this elderly woman walking a pram, their word for a baby carriage. And we say, are there any living McClures in the village? Oh, you want to see Euston? Oh, yeah, we tried that. Oh, okay, well, she said, his daughter is in the farm you passed on the way in, about 1 mile up the road, and she'll be just back from getting her kids at the school. And we heard Anya in the back seat go, kids? Yes. And I said, well, have the McClures been here a long time? And the Scots are nothing if not dry, right? And she looks over, she's got these granny glasses, she looks over the top of her granny glasses at me, and she says, aye, 13th century. And I felt 700 years of ghosts just straight through me. I couldn't believe it. found the old cemetery, right? And in the old cemetery, McClure, and they had there was this motto in Gaelic on all, which I'll get to in a minute. This motto in Gaelic on all the tombs, right? And many of the tombs are faded with nothing on them. They're indistinguishable from rocks, right? Because it's been hundreds of years in the rain. The last time I was over there in September, they let me ring the church bell. There were 18 people in attendance at Sunday service. And I said, Yank, you want to ring the bell? Okay. This poem's about the first night that I was back. The first night that we went and we found Glenelg. So we ended up in the farm kitchen of the daughter of Houston, my cousin Catherine, and I've got all these papers and I'm explaining who we are, and Houston shows up and his wife, and he says, well, what happened to you? You know, that part of the family was in California. And I said, yeah, that was my grandfather. He worked in Hollywood as a set carpenter. Right, oh, I in California. And I said, well, my grandparents died in '62. My mom was orphaned, and so we didn't really know much about who was who. And they said, oh, all right then. Well, when are you coming back? And that was it. And so every year we've been back, weddings, and they come over, like my cousins came over for their first anniversary, and I was just there for a month in September shepherding, and they run 500 head of sheep way up in the mountains, and you think you understand your life when you're about 40, you think you know the basic terms of your life, and that none of the basic things will change, but none of the basic structure of your life is going to change, right? And this was like this posthumous gift my mom had given me 4 years after she died. So this is Glenelg, first night, and it's got an epigraph, and the epigraph is Gaelic, and the epigraph is Gassam Bresan La. And the last line of the poem is the translation of that. And that's the family motto that I was seeing on all these tombstones. Gassam Bresan La. Out from this croft house opens the comfort of black mountains and black sea. Black wind flattening black grass, black granite and black names. Names with sharp shape, and names become smooth black rain. Black wind, black sheep, white snowflake specks high on the dead bracken hill to get today. Sheep don't get cold. A boy with whom I share 700 years of people here told me. Black tractor, black hay, black sky ferry tied to a black pier, black school, black shop, narrow black road in cursive down from Radigan Pass, black Riverfoot cottage where the Glenmore meets the black sound of slate, black sound of wind at the window, black ceiling of clouds scrolling fast, black smoke from the chimney, black heart, black blood in black veins, black ink in the dark. 102 years since my great-grandfather slept in this black glen, my silver car, black out on the black gravel drive, black lichen on black rock-stacked fence, up steep slopes by hands become dirt, black maple, black grass, 15 black, white, and black collie pups drowsing at their mother's black teat, black peat, black quilt, black pillow, black sheets, and I, who have never slept here, am back and drift. No, not drift. Touch ground to sleep in the comfort of black mountains and black sea, the infinity of color in black, until the day breaks. All right, 2 more little poems. One more in Scotland and then we'll come home. One more in Scotland and we'll come home. So there's this, somehow electricity and running waterless life seem to be a thing for me. I don't know why. Amy is so incredibly patient. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. Build this cabin. And anyway, out in Glenelg, there's this cottage way up at the top of the glen, right? So it's about maybe 8 miles up from the village, which is the community hall, the inn, which is also the pub, and the general store. That's the town hall, or that's the town center. That's all it is. And 8 miles up from that, there's this cottage. And it's a stone cottage, 17th, 18th century. And it turns out my great-great-grandfather used to shepherd there seasonally when he was young. And it's open at this very minute. The Hill Walkers Association maintains it. And and it's open this very second. And there's almost never anyone there. Like in a year, in a little logbook, there'll be maybe 10 visitors, right? And there's peat stacked beside the fireplace and some sticks. And this moment, it's unlocked right now. Like we could go. We could all just go, right? And we'd have a ceilidh, which is their word for a big music party. We'd have a ceilidh at this cottage. We barely fit, but we'd have fun. So I go there. Whenever I visit, I usually go up there for 3 or 4 days. They're really cool about, like, they give me, like, you know, fish and water and everything I need. And then they usually show up. You can't drive there except for Donnie, who's the farmer. He's about 45. He can drive there. It's unbelievable. It's not a drivable situation. There's no road, but he manages to 4-wheel drive up there. And they always bring a grill. You know, I have this like Thomas Hardy life for 4 or 5 days. And I take the table outside and I ride in the pasture in the mountains. I'm by myself. And then I'll hear... And then down through the trees and coming up, you know, over this little creek coming over the pasture is the family, right? He's driving this truck with a grill and a bunch of people are walking behind. And they'll come up and they'll bring a barbecue and we'll have a good time. Sordelin is the name of the cottage. And it's there right now. It's unlocked. And there's heat beside the fireplace. I've long believed in the muse, as poets do, right? Like apparently John Ashbery, no, it wasn't Ashbery. It was Berryman, John Berryman, who was teaching at Iowa. And he apparently told Phil Levine in Phil Levine's class, I want you to get up right now and kneel and pray to the muse. Right in the middle of class. He said, I want you to do that. And, you know, so I've long believed, I thought, well, geez, if Berryman taught that to Levine, I guess I better believe too. So I've long believed in the muse. But I have this other belief, like what happens to all the poems you don't write, right? I see my students after a year or two and I say, how's it going? And you see they're kind of like avoiding eye contact a little bit. Like, how's your partner and we talk a little bit. And I don't ask them if they're writing. And then it gets around to it and they're like, well, I haven't written very much. I'm like, it's okay. It really is okay because like it all goes away. Sooner or later, Shakespeare's going away, man, right? The sun is nice and stable now, but it all goes away eventually. And it's okay for a while, right? It's just what it does for you. And if it needs to, it'll come back. So who's in charge of that, right? If the muse is in charge of us getting it done, who's in charge of it not getting done? And so for me, I've always believed in the anti-muse. And I'm kind of not allowed to talk about it. Again, reverential or OCD, depending on who you ask. But I'm kind of not allowed to talk about it, so I better not say anything else about the anti-muse, except I think I know where she lives. Out far enough. For sorrow, we have love, and the waves dying in. We can visit our lives in the country of winter trees and blue ruin. For the nameless, we have silence. Where tenderness runs out, there is tenderness. A trail descends into the next glen. Our anti-muse's hair is the color of loam. For gospel, she has shelved volumes of everything we leave unwritten. For forgiveness, she has light from a peat fire, rain on small windows. So let's come home to Marquette, and then we'll just we'll chat. I've got some Q's and some A's, and if you have to go, we're a little over time, so that's all right too. And I'm happy to sign some books, and then maybe we'll go across the street if anybody wants to, and we'll raise a glass to our Marquette dead. This is called When Something's Good, Keep It. It's one of my new poems, and I'm going to ask you, the first of the Q&As is I'm going to ask you a Q, and I'm going to tell you to tell me a Marquette place, right? It can be a secret or a place that you've maybe forgotten about. I've got mine, so you have to think about your Marquette place that you want to tell me about it, or tell all of us about. And so I think you'll recognize some stuff here. When something's good, keep it. The night clouds rained and took all morning moving on, so that now afternoon opens its bright prism on everything. Cool breeze through the anemones of trees, skin of a passing woman's shoulder, gleaming chrome fender of her bike, black iron and translucent street lamp glass. like the granite gray, 6-foot, resolute-browed Easter Island head between pots of blue asters on a stoop and supervising the corner of 3rd and Ridge, I have taken my life most seriously. Fears and desires, desires and fears. Meanwhile, this clear, easy joy had been waiting for me. That passing red Jeep guy has stacked his roof high with equipage. Out he goes. We are born clean of clothes, money, or name. Numberless moments lined up to receive us. Thank you so much. So Q's and A's. So my Q, and if you have to take off, it's a little past time. Q's and A's. My Q is where is your Marquette place? And so mine is, you know, the little beach down by Lake Superior Theater, right? So just between there and like the platform on the head of the pump station, there's this little tiny beach, right, where people who moor their sailboats in the little mooring field keep their dinghies. Well, there's one guy who also keeps a wooden rowboat there. This one guy, and it's kind of bigger than a dinghy, and it gets in the way, and like, you know, and he got away with it for like 10 years, right, stashing his boat there. And then last summer, finally, like, there's a lock on it, right? Somebody else had put a lock on it and a note. You got to see the harbor master to get this boat unlocked. Damn, so long. You know, they put up these new parking meters and they locked my boat. And so I went and saw the harbor master. He was super apologetic. He's like, I'm so sorry. That is such a cool boat, and I love it there. But you know, the lake. This maybe it wasn't last year. The year the lake was really high and the beaches were really small. And he said, you know, people who've got these paid for to have their dinghies here. You know, a couple of them have said something. Totally not your fault. Like, it was a good run while it lasted. So that's my little secret Marquette place. Anybody got a Marquette place? Yeah.
It's the Yellow Dog River. My husband and I went brook trout fishing, and he was ahead of me on a bend, and so I was behind him, and I heard women singing.
Oh man.
And I'm like, wow, this is really weird. And I wasn't scared, but I couldn't identify where it was coming from. Like, is it like a log and it's humming?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was these women singing. It was different, you know, women. And I just, well, whatever. And I kind of caught up to them and then around a couple bends. And we went back to the truck and sat on the tailgate to have a beer. And I said, where is that commune on the Yellow Dog? Because there was one. He goes, well, it's not there anymore. I said, well, I heard the lady singing. And he's like, what? I go, yeah. And another friend of ours had heard it on the same bend.
Oh man.
Yeah, can't identify it.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if
man.
there's like a Ojibwe story or.
How many years ago would this have been?
Probably about 6.
So that was after Judith Minty had died. Do you know there was a magnificent poet named Judith Minty, and she had a family place in the Yellow Dog, and she spent a lot of time up there in the summers, and she's got this gorgeous book. Marty has it. You guys have it here, right? The Yellow Dog Journal, minty, like newly minted. And if I had to guess, if I had to presume to guess, I would not presume to guess whose voices they were, but in my mind, Judith's was one of them. That's beautiful. Yeah. Who else has a Marquette place? Who else has got a secret or a special Marquette place they want to share with us? Yeah, Chip.
Behind my Aunt and Uncle's house, there used to be this beautiful big birch tree. And from about the age of 6, the local neighborhood custom was to carve your initials in it.
Yeah.
So I go back to what's now a stump. And I think back to, 70 years
Yeah.
of carving my initials there. But it's just that kind of that serenity, it was just a very special place.
Yeah.
I drive by Bluff and Seymour all the time going, I wonder if there's any of that tree, just a little spriglet that I could collect. But,
Yeah. Is the stump is still there?
yeah.
Wow. Because birch stumps will rot, and they were they're unlike like an oak or whatever, but it's still the stump still goes on. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Reminds me of that fantastic, the one destined to slaughter children, right? It, like make them cry before bed, the giving tree, right? Where it's like it gives you this, it gives you that, and then finally the kid wants lumber or whatever, and then it's just a stump and it has nothing else to give, and the kid's an old man and he sits down on the stump and the tree is finally happy. Yeah, the stump, that's really beautiful. Cool. Where was your grandparents' house?
It was Bluff in Seymour. It was
Bluff and Seymour.
754 Bluff.
Okay, yeah.
Just a couple of houses off the corner.
Yeah, okay. Not too far from your place, Tim, I think, yeah. Cool. Was one more cool Marquette place?
I have this thing that I don't even know what it is, and I'm hoping your husband knows. Every time we pass it, I say, is that Shelter Bay? Is that Sand River? What is it? It's this little place we can't go, but we pass it on 28, and it's just like, I don't know, it's nirvana, this little thing that we're passing. Do you know, we've been married 160 years.
So if you're going,
You guys must have, I bet it's not far from here. You cannot get there, which is even more.
so you're going toward Munising.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say you're going toward, you turn right from your place,
Yeah.
and you're going toward Munising, you pass Shot Point, right? And then you start to see the lake on the left. And then there was the cottage where my dad and Linda lived, and then you see, and then the lake goes away, right? And there's some driveways.
Yes.
And then the lake comes back,
Yes.
right? And then there's the motel on the right,
Yes.
right? And then Sand River. And is it that where you look out past Sand River?
It must be that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I don't know what it is. It's just this respite, like that's the place.
That's actually some wilderness. I mean, there are some dirt roads that go out there, and a couple people have some camps down there. But for the most part, from there all the way around to the end of Whitefish Point, that Whitefish Bay Road, you know, the development with the house, that road ends about 5 miles in. From the end of that road, all the way around is pretty much wild lakeshore. Yeah, so you've identified paradise, and it's right there.
But I had a feeling you know.
It's kind of like the cottage. The door is unlocked right this moment. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk. I'm going to sign some books. Let's talk more. Thank you all for coming out. It meant a lot to me. Thank you.
Hope to see you back tomorrow night for Diane Seuss, 7 p.m. And for all the other events. And if you really love Jonathan today, come back for his workshops Wednesday and Thursday. Come back for those. You will not regret that at all. So thank you all. I'm gonna go home and have some scotch. Is what I'm gonna do.